Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
She admitted that she was somewhat madly in love with Ren. Inwardly, she was already a person who was crazy for love. She clung to the washstand for support as tears of grievance welled up in her eyes. How hard do I have to work to draw his attention? If Ruka hadn't turned up, she wouldn't mind waiting, she'd still have a chance, after all. But now, Ruka's presence had erased all her efforts, and she stole Ren away so easily. Just what is Ren's relationship with her? And when did he fall in love with her? Victoria closed her eyes while shedding a tear of resentment. At this moment, her cell phone rang, and she picked it up and answered it. Hello? Miss Parfait, we've found something about the matter you asked me to look into. As long as you pay me on time, we'll give you the information. I'll transfer the money to your bank account right away. Shoot. Victoria was in a somewhat turbulent mood. The caller was an unlicensed detective that she had hired with a lot of money, and they were even more capable. All right, I'll tell you since I believe you won't break your promise. Ruka Singh's parents are close friends with Ren Hassan's sister and brother-in-law, so they get along very well. Ruka's parents worked abroad all year long, so they allowed Scarlett Hassan to bring up their only daughter. Ruka had grown up by Scarlett's side since she was 2 years old until she was 16. Not only that, but I even found an old news report. Scarlett took Ruka to a party and introduced the latter on stage to declare her as her goddaughter. Therefore, Scarlett was considered a half-mother to Ruka. Victoria's eyes widened when she learned of this. She was shocked inwardly, but she also figured everything out. So, this was how Ren and Ruka got to know each other. Ron often stayed at Scarlett's place when he was 8 years old. His parents were too busy at work to care about him, so he also stayed at Scarlett's place at the time. Victoria's lips curled into a bitter forced smile. She finally figured out what had happened, but it was an outcome that she found unacceptable for a time. Ruka's relationship with Ren had begun not just several years ago, instead, they grew up together. She narrowed her eyes in anguish. How could Ren fall in love with his sister's goddaughter despite them being from different generations? There are so many women for him to choose from. Why does he have to choose such a path to take on? Isn't he worried that he'll be affected during the next election? Hasn't he thought about the risks in this regard? To think that you'd also make a misstep, Ren Hassan. She bit her lips with a sneer. Since I can't get my hands on you, I won't let you win her heart as you wish. Let's suffer together. Let's struggle in painful relationships. I mustn't be the only one who can't win the heart of the person I love. I want you to suffer with me. When Victoria returned to the private room, the dishes had been served. Ruka looked back at her with a toothy grin, saying, "You're back, Miss Parfait." A hint of jealousy flashed across Victoria's mind. Ruka had a pure and kind air about her, as though she wasn't scheming at all. She looked so wonderful that it made her envious. How could a person have no desire? Isn't she worried that someone else might steal Ren away? Or is she so confident of having him in her firm grasp? She's supposed to have her own worries and troubles. Why does she seem so carefree? Victoria could no longer go back to such days. As long as Ren didn't love her, she'd always be gloomy. However, she'd soon let Ruka taste what it was like to be in fear if the latter loved Ren enough. "Let's eat and chat over dinner," she said to Ruka before picking up the wine bottle and pouring a glass of wine for herself. After taking a sip of it, she said to Ruka earnestly, "Actually, Ruka, I know a little about you." Ruka paused for a moment before looking up at her. Victoria stared at her, saying, "You said you had grown up at your relative's place since you were little. The relative you were referring to was Madame Faulkner, right? Were you raised by her side when you were a child?" Ruka's eyes widened. How did Miss Parfait know about this? So, your relationship with Ren is one between an elder and a member of the younger generation in the family. You have no idea that I was once jealous of you. Well, now it seems that I was overthinking it. How could I possibly think that you and Ron were going out? You should call him something like Mr. Ren, right? Victoria fixed Ruka with a piercing gaze. Ruka pursed her lips and lowered her head as a feeling of guilt welled up within her. When Victoria saw this, she was angry as well. Obviously, they've gone beyond such a relationship and are planning to become a couple instead of a family, huh? I'm not gonna allow it, though. Ruka, let me remind you something here. Do you know how sensitive Ren's identity is right now? The whole world is watching his every move and everything he says, so he's not allowed to make even the slightest mistake. The outside world even cares about his relationships. She stared at Ruka threateningly as if wanting to imprint these words on the latter's soul. Ruka pursed her lips and nodded. I know that. Victoria then continued, so, for the sake of his future, you should know to avoid getting too close to him so that he can continue to take over the office, right? It's okay that I know it. However, if someone else learns about it, you know how disastrous it'll be for Ron. Also, the entire Hassan family will be affected. Ruka raised her eyes all of a sudden as she was shocked inwardly. Really? Will the matter be so serious? Victoria knew that Ruka wouldn't dare put the Hassan family's future at risk. She was brought up by Scarlett, to whom she felt grateful, so she wouldn't destroy the Hassan family's footing because of her own feelings. Taking another sip of wine, she said to Ruka, I'm saying this to you because I love Ron. I don't want anything wrong to happen to him, nor do I want him to fall from grace. Do you know how outstanding he is? He reached his position at such a young age. Many people can only look up to him. Ruka clenched her fists under the table. Of course, she wouldn't do such things to hurt Ren and the Hassan family. Of course. Ron is a man, and he's also very confident. If he doesn't know how to hold back, then you should understand the risks involved and reject him. You don't want to ruin everything he has with your own hands, do you? Victoria pretended to look worried. Ruka took a deep breath and said, Thank you for telling me this, Miss Parfait. I won't let something like that happen. When Victoria heard these words, she revealed a smirk on her red lips. I'm glad you understand. I want to protect him from harm as much as you do. Also, please don't tell him that I said this to you. I'm afraid that he'd come after me. He doesn't like others to interfere in his affairs. Got it? Ruka nodded. Rest assured. This will be just between us. You're a good girl, you're beautiful, and you have the Hassan family to support you. I'm sure your future partner won't be any less outstanding, so you still have many choices, Victoria explained to her as if they were close sisters. However, Ruka's thoughts were a mess. She didn't have time to consider much, but there was one thing she was extremely firm about, and that was she would never do anything to hurt the Hassan family and Ron. The light in her eyes seemed to disappear all of a sudden, revealing a flash of melancholy. Opposite her, Victoria noticed her gaze, and she felt a hint of bitterness on the inside. Ruka's expression proved one thing, she really liked Ron. Victoria knew that as long as Ren took the initiative to pursue a girl, that girl would definitely fall for him. How could a naive girl like Ruka escape from Ren's charm? She had spent 5 years of her youth just to make him spare her another glance. Feeling pained, Victoria picked up the wine bottle and poured it into the glass again, and time gradually went by as she drowned her sorrows with wine. When Ruka returned to her senses, she saw Victoria call on a waiter, and said to him drunkenly, "Get me another bottle of wine." At the sight, Ruka persuaded her, "Miss Parfait, don't drink anymore. You've drunk too much. Ruka, you don't know how bitter I feel. If you were me, you'd know how painful it is to love someone without being able to have them. I love him so much, and I tried everything to get close to him, but in the end, I got nothing. Victoria didn't care about showing her vulnerability and pain. She wanted Ruka to see that she was also responsible for her pain. Ruka, how would I not feel pained? Unrequited love is the most painful thing in the world. Saying that, Victoria rested her forehead on her hand and began crying. Ruka looked at her, not knowing how to comfort her all of a sudden. She handed her a piece of tissue. "Miss Parfait, you're drunk. Let me take you home." "No. I'm not drunk. I don't want to go back. I want to see him." Victoria raised her head and wiped away her tears before she asked Ruka, "Ruka, will he come to pick you up? If he does, I can see him too." Victoria usually didn't have a chance to meet Ren, and not everyone in his office could speak to him. Therefore, it was really not easy for her to see him. "After I send you home, I'll call a cab home myself." "Are you going back to the Hassan residence?" "I'm going to a friend's house." Ruka decided to spend the night at Rita's house tonight and talk to Rin about moving out the next day. "Ruka, you're so lucky to be able to spend so much time with him." "On the other hand, meeting him is a matter of luck for me," Victoria said enviously, her eyes bloodshot. Ruka pursed her lips and shook her head. "No, Miss Parfait, you've misunderstood. If I remember correctly, I've only seen Mr. Hassan around 10 times. Victoria looked at her suspiciously. "How is that possible? Isn't it easy for you to meet him?" "It's true. Mr. Hassan is a person I admire and worship. Even if I met him, I wouldn't dare to say much to him," Ruka answered truthfully. In fact, after kissing him that night, she still respected him like an elder and didn't dare to think about it at all, let alone make mistakes and act carelessly in front of him. Deep down, she was even afraid of him. In the past few days, everything had been messed up, from their relationship to her feelings, as if nothing was under her control. She had even got to know Rin from a new perspective. She was shocked to find out that he always had feelings toward her that he had never said to her. Meanwhile, Victoria smiled bitterly. Did that mean she had guessed it right? Had Rin fallen for Ruka first? This discovery hit her like a truck. How gently would Rin treat the girl that he liked and accepted? At this moment, Ruka's cell phone rang. When she glanced at it, her heartbeat immediately stopped. It was a call from Ren. At the same time, she took a glance at the time. It was already 8:40. She said to Victoria, "Miss Parfait, I'm going to take a call." Managing to guess who it was, Victoria nodded. Ruka then took her phone and went outside to answer. She walked all the way out of the restaurant to a parking lot in a garden by the door and took a deep breath to relax herself before she answered the call. "Hello? Haven't you finished eating yet?" Ren's low and magnetic voice sounded from the phone. "We have, and I will take Miss Parfait home soon because she's drunk. Then, I'll go to my friend Rita's house tonight, so don't wait for me." Ruka smiled. "Why are you going to your friend's house?" he immediately questioned. "I've already promised her that I'll stay over at her house tonight. She's too lonely from being at home all alone, so she asked me to spend some time with her." Ruka offhandedly came up with an excuse. However, he obviously didn't believe her reason and scoffed in a low voice. "Are you keeping your distance from me after you listened to something Victoria said to you?" Ruka felt embarrassed. How did he know? Of course not. I just promised my friend that I'd spend time with her. Don't think too much about it. Ruka continued to try to run with her excuse. Ruka, no matter what others say to you, you don't need to worry or be afraid when you're with me. Understand? Ren's voice was deep, powerful, and full of a sense of security. Ruka's chest suddenly tightened. Though he had clearly expressed nothing, it still felt like he was hinting at something aggressively. They weren't even together yet. Wasn't he going to ask her for her opinion? Mr. Ren, I really respect you as an elder. Ever since I was a child, you've always been a role model that I admire. My parents hope that I will learn from you and become an outstanding person, and I'm also trying to do the same. Enough. I don't want to hear this. His voice was low and gentle, yet strong and compelling. Ruka blurted out a bunch of words in a panic, but to him, they were all pointless, so he didn't mind interrupting her. Meanwhile, she fell silent. She felt as if there was a net that was wrapping around her tightly, causing her to lose her breath. She subconsciously let out a sigh, her breathing quickening as she asked, "Then, what do you want me to do?" The other end suddenly fell silent for a few seconds before Ren's deep and hoarse voice slowly sounded. "Fine, you can stay at your friend's house tonight. Let's talk about this tomorrow." Ruka bit her lip, feeling powerless. It seemed that he would always give her room to relax when it was the most appropriate. In fact, she really wanted to lay everything out with him and talk to him about what happened in the past 2 days. Darn it. How could he not even give me a chance? Ruka didn't notice that there was a black car parked next to her, and a pair of intense and unpredictable eyes were staring at her from inside, watching her frustration and the way she patted her forehead inside. "Sir, aren't you going to comfort Miss Singed?" In the driver's seat, Elijah asked curiously. No, Ren loosened his tie. If he got out of the car now, he would only scare her, because she was now like a frightened bird and only thought about fleeing from him. He could guess what Victoria had said to her, but Ruka was too young and had too many worries and doubts. Besides, the feelings between them weren't strong enough to give her the courage to flock to him like a moth would to a flame. Ruka, who had no idea that a certain man was watching everything she did at the moment, raised her head with a speechless expression and let out a few sighs before she turned toward a small tree next to her and began to grab the leaves as if she were venting her emotions. When the man in the car saw her actions, the corners of his mouth raised into a smile. Is this the way she vents her emotions? How childish. It was only after Ruka had pulled out all the leaves in front of her that she returned to the private room. Upon pushing the door open, she saw Victoria lying on the table and rushed over. "How are you feeling now, Miss Parfait?" "Ruka, I'll take you home. I feel so dizzy." Victoria did drink too much, and she felt rather terrible at the moment. "Okay. Give me a second. I'll take you home after I settle the bill." Saying that, Ruka left to pay for their meal. After she was done, she returned to the room and picked up Victoria's bag. Then, she stretched out her hand to help Victoria get up. As Victoria was still able to walk, the two of them left with half of Victoria's body leaning on Ruka's body. Ruka found it difficult to support Victoria, and because Victoria staggered as she walked, as soon as they left the restaurant gate and went to the parking lot, Ruka suddenly tripped over Victoria's leg. Before Ruka could scream, she collapsed onto the ground while holding onto Victoria. Instantly, she felt a severe pang of pain in her knees, probably because she had hurt her knees when she fell. Just when she was about to get up to help Victoria, she suddenly heard the sound of a car door, and she couldn't help but look up. Upon seeing a tall and handsome figure walking toward them against the light, Ruka felt her heart getting caught in her throat as her beautiful eyes widened. It's him? Why is he here? She suddenly recalled that there was a car parked here just now. Had he been in the car all the time? At that thought, she yearned to bury herself into a hole. "Are you all right, Miss Parfait?" Elijah came over to help Victoria up. In front of Ruka, a large palm with distinct joints stretched out as Ren made to pull her up. Stunned, she sat on the ground and looked at his outstretched palm. Then, without giving him her hand, she resolutely stood up by pushing herself off the ground, while Rain looked at her solemnly with an intense gaze. Just then, two arms suddenly wrapped around Ren's back. It was Victoria. She had sobered up. She pushed away Elijah's hand to hug Ren without a single care in the world. Ren. You're finally here. I waited so long for you. Elijah frantically stood next to her and offered, Miss Parfait, I'll take you home. Ren's eyebrows furrowed as he pried Victoria's tightly clasped hands away with his large palm. He turned around and held her shoulders, not allowing her to get any closer to him. Victoria, you're drunk. Go home and get some rest. His stern voice sounded. I don't want to. I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to hug you. After speaking, Victoria struggled against his hands again, trying to fall back into his arms, but Elijah hurriedly stood in front of Ron. As Victoria had her eyes closed since the beginning, she didn't realize that she was hugging Elijah's waist. She even buried her face in his chest. Ron, I really like you. Can you not treat me so coldly? Just as Ruka was watching the show from the side, a large and overbearing hand dragged her in the direction of the car. She hurriedly turned her head and looked toward Elijah and Victoria with an inexplicable feeling of worry until she suddenly remembered that Victoria's bag was still in her hands. At that thought, she quickly broke away from Ren's hand and delivered the bag to Elijah. Only then did she turn around and return to the car. Ren personally opened the car door for her, and when she got in the car, she was about to look back when a low male voice sounded above her. Why aren't you going in? As Ruka was still in a daze, he became even more displeased. What are you looking at? Then, Ren's aggressive and large hand landed on the back of her head as he pushed her into the back seat irritably. As soon as Ruka sat down, he got inside as well and said to the bodyguard in the driver's seat, Drive. What about Elijah? Ruka asked worriedly. After all, it didn't seem good to leave him alone to deal with a situation like this. He can handle it. Ron replied indifferently. Clearly, he was a little jealous that Ruka was so concerned about his assistant. He turned his head to look at her, and his long arm suddenly reached past her chest, shocking her. Then, when she saw the man pull the seatbelt around her and fasten it, she felt her heart warm from the sense of security that he brought her. Ruka pursed her lips and looked at the scenery outside the window. Suddenly, she thought of something and couldn't help but turn her head to stare at the man next to her. Were you in the car when I came out to answer your call just now? Ren narrowed his eyes. Then, he lightly nodded, not denying her words. Ruka was immediately embarrassed. She recalled the way she had pulled the leaves out to vent her emotions. Had he witnessed everything? How shameful. Furious, she turned away and looked out the window, but her face flushed red involuntarily. He looked at her quietly for a few seconds. When his gaze fell on her hand that was resting on her knee, he naturally reached out and covered her hand with his. Taken aback by his actions, Ruka instinctively tried to break away, but he held onto her slender hand bossily, not allowing her to do so. Her heart raced faster, but she didn't dare to forcefully pull away. After all, there were 2 bodyguards sitting in front of her, and she still had to protect his pride as a vice president. Hence, she ended up being held in his strong grip. As the heat of his palm pressed onto the back of her hand, it also spread into the depths of her heart. She felt as if she were hiding from the world and secretly carrying an emotion that was passionate yet unaccepted. If he wasn't a vice president and was just a regular businessman, or even working under any other profession, they wouldn't need to consider what others thought before they did anything. However, with his distinguished background, any small stain on him would be amplified to the extreme. Even if they were not related by blood, their relationship was still taboo solely because she was raised as a goddaughter by Scarlett's side. If someone used this issue to blame him for being immoral, it could obliterate all of his achievements. How could Ruka risk ruining everything he had? She was too unworthy and insignificant to destroy such an excellent man like him.
If you have enjoyed this story, please like, share and subscribe to join our Oral Divine community. Please don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you can be notified on our next releases. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.